All right, Sam, after a lot of, I don't know, discussion, rumors, Jaire Alexander, Packers cornerback, he's officially been released. There's been trade rumors. The whole offseason, we expected Jaire not to be with the Packers. It was a big story going into the draft. We don't think Jaire Alexander is going to be in Green Bay. They're going to draft a corner. Well, they didn't until round 7. And it's finally happening here in June. Packers releasing Jaire Alexander. Also, report out there from Jordan Schultz that they had some talks with the Buffalo Bills around draft time that never materialized. That makes a lot of sense. But what are your initial thoughts on Jaire being on the open market now?
Yeah, so that's what makes it interesting is what Green Bay did or didn't do in the draft. This was expected in terms of everyone had been talking about the relationship is irreparably damaged, and people were assuming that they were going to move on from him. And from that point of view, the timing of post June 1st is not surprising. That makes sense. That's when a lot of teams designate these types of moves. But if that was the case, I mean, we were looking at this Green Bay cornerback room and saying, even with Jaire Alexander, there's a question mark at cornerback too. And they seem to have a bunch of guys that love playing in the slot and guys that don't necessarily excel playing outside. It seemed like they were just going to ask, Nate Hobbs to play outside and he would be that guy. But that's with Jaire there. And you're like, okay, that's fine. But now you get rid of Jaire Alexander. Well, you're back to square one in terms of who is starting outside for this team that you have confidence in. And even if you think that Nate Hobbs can be one of those guys on the other side, you still have now a glaring hole at the other spot where there's nobody that you think has plus level play. Now you've got some options, the guys that have got, that have played in the past. But I think that's a potential weakness for a team that's trying to take a step from good to great, and as at least last year was banging its head against that glass ceiling every time they played one of those contending teams in the NFC. It seems that this does not help that.
Yeah, I think they'll have Keyshawn Nixon maybe getting a shot, even though he's played mostly in the slot. Javon Bullard, likely the slot corner. You mentioned Nate Hobbs, who I think has done his best work in the slot, but can play outside. Was initially an outside corner coming out of college. Carrington Valentine, late round pick Micah Robinson, undrafted free agent Kazir Brown. I mean, it's when we talk camp battles, we'll be talking Packers and the cornerback situation and how they're going to sort that out. As far as Jaire Alexander, I mean, why is he out? There was a point where he goes in the first round in 2018, hits the ground running as one of the better rookie corners. I think projects by year 3, he's in the running for the best cornerback in the NFL. At a time when the NFL didn't have a clear top corner, like if you were ranking cornerbacks from 2019 to 22, like who you putting up there? It was very difficult to do. Jaire Alexander, almost by default, I think he's been extremely consistent, but until all the injuries hit over the last 4 years, he hasn't played more than 600 snaps in 3 out of those 4 seasons. Still can play. I think when he's out there, off coverage, ball skills, everything that he showed at Louisville, everything that he showed early in his career. He had the pick 6 against Will Levis last year. So he's an absolute ball hawk, still moves pretty well, but the injury concerns and missing about half the games over the last couple of years are a major question mark for Jaire Alexander at this point.
Yeah, injury is obviously a huge question for a guy that wants to be one of the best paid corners in the NFL and was. And then the other thing is he's kind of a lunatic. There's a guy, remember, that kind of invited himself into the captain's coin toss.
Former captain. We're talking about Packers captain Jaire Alexander here. That's who you're talking about.
Does it count if you just invited yourself to that spot? Yeah, former captain on that one day where I just went out with the coin toss people.
For those who forget the story, he was not elected captain for this particular game. I don't know the history of his captaincy with the Packers, if he's ever been or how I don't know. But I know he wasn't supposed to be captain for that one game, and he just showed up for the coin toss anyway and got suspended, I think, for the next week, just for violating team rules. So, yeah, Packers captain Jaire Alexander hits the open market here.
So, overall, I think there's a touch of the crazy attached to Jaire Alexander. Look, sometimes that's a good thing, right? Particularly a corner, I think it helps to be a little bit unhinged and go into a game thinking that you can shut down Justin Jefferson one-on-one, because that's what allows you to do that. If you, like a rational human being, would look at that and say, of course I'm going to get barbecued by one of the best wide receivers in football. Jaire Alexander has had games where he's gone in and shut down Justin Jefferson, right? There are not many humans on the planet that can do that. But you have to deal with the flip side of that, which is sometimes he goes like off the reservation and does, utterly insane things, like marches himself out to a coin toss that he's not supposed to be at.
What I should have said earlier too, by the way, if you were ranking top corners during the last 6 or 7 years, Jalen Ramsey would be right there at the top of the list. Jaire would be there too. Both of those guys potentially available now. We're talking. This doesn't happen often. Even as they get into their 30s and they're a little bit older, and they could still play. And again, I have a history, Sam. I have a history of injured guy, buy low, whatever, take a shot. I'm not going to come off that again. I mean, isn't this a great buy low for some team? Now, if you're a rebuilding team, I don't know if I want to do that. But if you're a team like the Raiders that has a massive need at cornerback and they're already trying to compete this year, would you make this kind of move as a buy low with Jaire Alexander, who, again, when he's out there, I think can still play, but just hasn't been out there very often over the last 4 years?
All right, that's enough of that, Steve. Over 50% of the people listening to this are not subscribed right now. So click that button and then we can get back to whatever it is Steve's telling you about. Well, yeah, but the question becomes, are we buying low? I mean, first question becomes, what is this contract demands going to be? Because this was a guy who was one of the best paid corners in the NFL, albeit lower than potentially it could have been. But this was a guy on, $21 million a season who is not being cut for performance reasons. Now, maybe you can argue the injuries are sort of a performance reason, but as you said, he can still play. He can still cut it at that level, and he becomes one of the best corners, it's been available on the open market for a long time. What is his contract demand going to be? Because I think it could realistically, he's still only 28 years old. He's not pushing, past his 30s. He should still be looking for pretty top of the market type of money. So I don't think this is like a Jaire Elam where you're buying low and seeing if you can, reclaim anything. This is an unexpected top of the market type of corner who's suddenly available in June. So for Buffalo, it's interesting. A team that was talked about as maybe interested in him at draft time. Suddenly he's available for quote unquote free. They should be all over that, right? But are they all over that at $20 million a year? Probably not.
No, but I don't think Buffalo's all over it anymore because they drafted Maxwell Hairston.
I mean, maybe, but again, it's contingent.
They drafted all they drafted was corners and defensive linemen in the draft. I don't think they're going to be looking at this point.
But they did, but none of those guys are Jaire Alexander, right? Like Maxwell Hairston maybe has Jaire Alexander within his range of outcomes, but it would be in the 97th percentile. So for a team that wants to win a Super Bowl this year, if you were given the option of having Jaire or not on the roster, you would want them, but at what cost?
Feels like a Baltimore Ravens type of move to kick the tires. They got Chidobe Awuzie in there, potentially slotted in opposite Nate Wiggins. Atlanta Falcons could take a look. I mentioned the Raiders, maybe Pete Carroll. You send him to Pete Carroll as a reclamation project. I think it is a buy low. I don't know what kind of market he's going to have at this point. I don't think it's going to be that strong because of the injuries, because of what you said about, declaring himself captain and everything else that's come with it. I don't think it's going to be a massive price tag for Jaire Alexander at this point.
What do you think he's going to be asking for? Because I don't see how you can take a corner who's as good as he is at 28 and have him on the open market available for not a lot of money at all.
I don't know, 12 to 15 is what it lands at.
Nah.
Even though he's a $20 to $25 million player when he's healthy, that's the reality. That's where we are at this point. So yeah, I'd explore it. I'd be interested to see.
Dude,
then again, the Packers cornerback situation, it doesn't look great on paper. We'll see if they can handle the loss, but they haven't had him for most of the last few years anyway.
What if this is the latest? How did Howie Roseman do this move? They did it before with James Bradbury when he was cut loose from the New York Giants for similar kind of reasons in terms of, look, you're a good player, but you're not worth the money that's due to you this year. Different numbers, blah, blah, blah. But similar idea. The Eagles pounced on James Bradbury late in the offseason. It's man, how does the league keep letting Howie do this? Even if the money was pushed, into the $15 million a year type of bucket. I mean, Philadelphia's corners outside of the two young guys that played last year, Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. Well, now you're relying on either Adoree Jackson or Keely Ringo to come in and be a good player. What if they just went to hell with that? Let's go get Jaire for a year, 1 year, $15 million. Now you got Jaire Alexander on that roster. That would be disgustingly good.
I think the contenders, teams like the Ravens, the Eagles, they should look at it. The teams that they're trying to put themselves over the top. I mean, the Eagles are already on top, but trying to top off a really strong roster, like it. Could be a good fit. Jaire Alexander, released by the Green Bay Packers.
Thanks for watching all the way to the end of our video.
For more great content, click here to subscribe and here to watch another video. We'll see you again soon.